we go against the nature of sleeping, which I'm sure a lot of us know what that is. So, what does it mean to be authentic? I think it's this being in our true nature. And what that is, I think is part of that journey and the legendary quest.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. I am ecstatic to share with you this new project. As you might see here, we have the legendary questers in front of us. You can see their previous videos, meet more about them. But this new channel series that we have is something that I've been very excited about. And we invite you to go on the legendary quest with us. What does that mean? We're going to be going chapter by chapter and discussing the topics of each chapter. What we'd love is if you engage, whether you're commenting below, or sometimes we'll have events where you can join us, and we just really want this to be interactive. So very excited to do a kickoff today. We'll be starting with chapter 1. It is, are you pursuing your authentic goals? And just to give you some context, we're not going to be reading the chapter. We're going to be talking about how this concept of the question of what the topic of the chapter is about, are you pursuing your authentic goals, relates to our life. And we would love to hear how it resonates with you, how it doesn't, and where you're at in your journey. So bringing Dr. Kulkarni and Dr. Yu, what else would you like to add to this part of our journey together?
Well, thanks, Jillian, for a wonderful introduction. I think, this is super exciting, and we are all very excited to sort of go or continue on this legendary quest. But, even before we talk about, pursuing authentic goals, maybe we should talk about what is authentic. What do we even mean by that chapter?
Yeah.
My daughter asked me one time, what does this legendary quest mean? And I think it means different things to different people. So I think we should talk a little bit about what authentic really means for each of us.
Definitely.
Francis, do you want to open the can of worms?
What is authentic or authenticity? I would first start by saying actually something we were talking about before, or just before this. We can put the words to it and make graphs and books or videos, etc. But ultimately what comes across is the lived experience. And the, I was using the word resonate, but what aspect of the person that you just resonate with.
Yeah.
And the example I gave earlier was you read the same book twice and you resonate with it in a different way the first and second time. And perhaps I like to offer authenticity perhaps is when you're really actually resonating with yourself. And that doesn't mean you're not resonating with other people, but the interaction with others is not disturbing the internal resonation and resonating with other people. And I realized, for me at least, talking about topics like these, if it's too clear and structured, then actually for me it's not the best. I'm not doing the best job. So, for example, one of the books I have lined up to read is Sun Tzu's Art of War, and it's known as like a military book, like how to. But then some Chi meditation masters say, "Oh yeah, it's not about military. It's actually about conquering yourself." Or I could read it and sometimes saying, this literally could be in business. So, I mean, we don't know why and how they wrote it, but it transcends this just the content because it resonates in a way with itself, and in different ways with other people. So that's what I would say. The authenticity is really resonating well with oneself and being able to resonate in different aspects and all aspects of life.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's, sorry, go ahead.
No, yeah, I was just thinking, I mentioned to you that I was working with shamanic healer, and there were so many overlaps in our shared experiences. And one thing was, she has a book called Born to Freak, and it was about divergent minds, right? And I just shared that I really resonated with this divergent mind book. And it talks a lot about masking to fit in. And I have felt my whole life, like I would be, there's the whole concept of highly sensitive person. And the social construct of who I wanted to be when I was younger was this very strong person. But inside, emotionally, I'm very emotionally sensitive, emotionally connected being. So in order to kind of mask that per se, or to hide that persona, Brene Brown's got kind of like the armor in my mind. I'm just thinking like armor up so that people didn't see the authentic aspect of myself, which is more sensitive, which in our society could be a weakness.
Yeah.
I highlighted aspects of myself that were more tomboyish, that were more athletic. And those are two parts of myself, but I surrendered core aspects of myself. And I just felt like I really cultivated and developed the aspects of myself that society was championing, like going into surgery, right? Well, that's something I could do. It was a part of myself, but I had to give up huge parts of myself in order to do that. And that's where I started to feel like I wasn't being authentic to my whole self.
Yeah, I think, Jillian, thanks for sharing that. I mean, that's very, very powerful, right? I mean, it perfectly explains what we want to bring forth in this idea of, living your authentic goals or achieving your authentic goals. I think being authentic also means being easy, being in the flow, being full of life, being vital, feeling like you're part of the whole, resonating, like Francis says, with vitality, and, really feeling that you're making your contributions, living your life as if this was the day. And we're not talking here about sort of, instant gratification and living a hedonistic lifestyle. I think it's much more deeper than that. I think you're really saying that, how can we truly identify if the way you're spending your life, your lived experience is truly in unison with who you want to be, and how do we do that? Why is it important to do that? And I think you gave a great example that, we often do things to fit in, to mask. I mean, anybody who's immigrated a country would easily be able to say that when you go to a new place, you want to look good, you put on a mask. I mean, then you got to go through the university or education, you put on another mask, then you have to fit in into your job, you put a third mask, and then you got to say certain things and not say certain things, you put a fourth mask, and then you got to live in certain neighborhood, you put another mask. And so slowly you got this, onion layers, and, your core inner self is just lost way somewhere. And, you kind of fit into a predefined, predetermined, preconceived mold. So this is not about breaking free. This is about really sort of highlighting that inner core so that you live, a fulfilled existence, so just want to make those distinctions.
Yeah, and I'm curious if both of you, if you have things that come to mind, you think, oh, I had to suppress this part of myself. I know, Francis, you talk about the familial pressures that you had to go into medicine. Like, were there times that you felt like I'm really suppressing this part of myself that you really wanted to explore, but maybe felt like it wasn't in alignment with what other people wanted for you?
Yeah, I mean, I can start answering while he's kind of thinking through it. I mean, I was in training for nearly 15 years, and certainly, it was all about, you got to go get it. You got to, be at the top of the class and achieve this and that and publish and, have an excellent resume and find the job and establish a great medical career. And that was all great. I mean, you're going straight 15 years, but the price to pay was, losing a lot of the hobbies and, inner interests and, in fact, it's funny, like my wife didn't even know for years that I ever held a painting brush. She just didn't know that I was interested in art. It was like, oh,
which we can show,
one day,
right? This,
yeah, I painted that.
Amazing, which is absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible.
Yeah, so she thought one day I was like buying brushes, one point. It's like, what are you doing? This is why are you wasting your time here? I said, no, I was interested. It's like, what are you just kidding me? Stuff like that. So, or spending time with music or, writing, for example, or even, looking at antiques or, reading world history or traveling. That all had to be dampened to provide the time, effort, and energy to build the medical career. So, there's definitely that imbalance, right? I mean, if I had to redo it, I would do it way differently, right? I mean, there would be much more now in retrospect, there would be much more balance crafting that out. But, going forward, you just, go for it, because a lot of our society is very achievement driven, right? I mean, once you've got your MD or whatever, DO or dentistry, that's what we and people and parents and society and everybody sees. I mean, nobody cares really, or at least it appears to be, about what you had to go through or what you had to suppress. And not just about medicine. I think, it's true to every professional, right? I mean, there is a lot of effort. Like I have so many lawyer friends and accountant friends, 4 o'clock, they're showing up to their office, weekends included. I mean, there's a huge price to be paid so that they build their careers. And then what do they lose? A very, very, very well off lawyer friend of mine read through our book, and he was almost in tears. I've never seen. He's usually like, yeah, things are very busy, and I'm doing great. And he has this beautiful waterfront house, and he was just almost torn when he was in. He just looked at me and said, you know what? I was the happiest when I had nothing. And it just blew me away. He just got so touched by the concepts in the book. And that's chapter 1. Did he live his authentic goals? That's something to be questioned, right? It was a very powerful experience in 15 minutes of our chat. And I said, okay, well, we'll regroup in a couple months when you've had more time to digest it. And so that's what we mean by authenticity, that, none of us want to live in the regret that, I wish I had done that, or I wish I had done differently, and that gap often is a big challenge. I think there's a lot of literature on that what do people think at the end of their lives, that, what would have they done differently? So that's what makes this probably very urgent, that, how do we truly come to light, and how do we truly, contribute to the world and add meaning to ourselves, our community, society, and world at large. And that's where I think this is why the book sort of starts at recognizing that authenticity.
Yeah, and you have some foreshadowing for chapter 2 about the labels and about what really matters. But Francis, we'll get back to you. What were your thoughts?
So one thing that came to mind, well, 2 things, just to continue with what the previous discussion is. So I wasn't the child that said, I was 4 years old playing with the stethoscope and saying, I want to be a doctor. I know there are people like that, but it just was not me. Somehow, just good at studying. I liked science. My parents made me go to SAT school and all these things. And part of it was a lot of, let's call it inspiration for my parents to go to medical school. And it comes from a lot of being immigrants, wanting a stable job, because it's not something that it's not something that was guaranteed to them. I guess that's a better way to put it. And looking back, I'm glad I did it, because it helped me explore a lot of different things I may not have explored otherwise, which I'll talk about in a bit. But once I started disengaging with, I am not my parents' extension of them. Uh, I mean, in a way I am, but in a way I'm not. So I don't want to lose the fact that, yes, I want to thank them for things they did, but also not revere them so much that I don't see them as people who never make mistakes. So luckily though, I when I first applied to medical school, I applied to basically New York, because I'm in New York, MD schools. Yeah, maybe I applied to like 6 or 7 of them, which apparently is not a thing you do. It's like, oh, okay. I don't know. It's like they don't know. And the second time, which I was glad actually, because in between undergrad and medical school, I was just able to take a just recalibrate. I don't know what it was, but I actually enjoyed it. And then I applied again, and I actually ended up going into the DO school near me. And frankly, which I think was a boon for me, because I think if I didn't, it would have taken longer to have the more holistic psycho-spiritual dimensions that I mean, it's part of the general philosophy of the old schools, but it's frankly, it's not that emphasized as much. But personally, for me, I was able to, um, I couldn't let go of this way of healing. And we were talking about healing before, that I guess was calling to me in a way. So the way I would put it is, the book, the book. There's a Chinese medicine book called "The Web That Has No Weaver," and Ted Kapchuk, right? And there's a idea in Chinese medicine acupuncture where literally the doctor or healer just physically appears into the room, and the patient starts getting better. And I asked one of my acupuncture teachers, like, yeah, that's kind of like a metaphor. I don't pay much attention to it. But it's like, okay, fine. But then later I realized that's actually talked about a lot. That's partially kind of my impression now, shamanic healing, partly how it works is this presence of the person who's helping with the healing that engages with the patient's quote unquote healing, whatever it is. So for me, so my practice right now is just osteopathic manipulation, acupuncture, and meditation. And the holistic approach is something that was always there, available for me. And sometimes I get it for some people who are just really reductionist, evidence-based minded. It just doesn't make sense. But for me, I think just rediscovering my more ancient Asian kind of philosophical ideas of healing. It's totally, maybe to get a little philosophical, phenomenological and subjective experience. Like I can say, we're all n equals one. Who cares if that treatment number needed to treat equals 100?
Yeah.
Or number needed to harm is 50. Well, if that one thing that helped 100 people can harm me, or the thing that harmed 50 people can help me, then why does it? Yeah, I mean, yes, it's helpful that we have that information, but these studies are uh, descriptive, but they're not proscriptive or prescriptive. But then a lot of time in the mainstream, quote unquote, conventional medicine, it's, oh, things that happened this way in the past, descriptive, somehow equates to proscriptive. This is the way you should do it because in these people, these are the things that happened then. Well, that may be true, and gives us information about what's going to happen. But so anyway, the reason I'm telling this is because I'm more gravitating really this towards tapping into being available there for the healing to take place. And I'm sure you've seen that with that same lawyer story, right? It's not like if you being there and your friend reading the book, but you being there helped catalyze a healing moment there, like literally you just being there. Or when Jillian, when you're coaching, you're just there and you're not trying to say do this, but then it catalyzed something happening, and that's so for me. Kind of pulling it together, it's this alchemy of what is a catalyst, and the catalyst is health and healing, right? And same thing for the legendary quest. It's this authenticity, the wholeness and healing, which we actually learn to not pay attention to in medical school. That's kind of partly how it works. That's not to say that things we learn in medical school are stupid or wrong, or whatever. It's just it doesn't include the aspect of the role of the healer's presence in it and paying attention to how that's working already. So basically, health oriented versus disease oriented, which is kind of the whole holistic thing.
Right.
And uh, yeah, so that's a big part of my what I'm thinking I'm trying to do.
Mhm.
With all the things I'm doing, whether it is meditation, my private practice, the legendary quest, it's my summit, and that's not to say that I always am successful with the thing I'm trying to do, because sometimes I think I know what I'm trying to do. I think I'm being authentic, but then I mask myself for myself. It's like, oh yeah, this is what you want. No, it isn't. And then I mean, sometimes we need experienced wisdom to learn that. Oh, like that lawyer, if they read it 5 years ago, they may not have realized it. And
Yeah.
but it's a catalyst, right? I think that's what we want to be a legendary quest, is to catalyze people's quests, right?
Yeah, I mean, that was so powerful. I mean, and not that I haven't heard it before, but I think the way you articulated that in relation to authenticity is so powerful. I mean, I think one of the key aspects I wanted to highlight was how you described how the lived experience and, how the societal influences and how peer influences and school and other things craft your belief system, right? And sometimes or many times will take you away from your authentic self. So that goes back to our limited self model piece that we talked about earlier in the introduction in the book. So I think that ties in so closely that I think you also highlighted for me the second aspect of experimenting and failing forward and learning from it and really sort of thinking more broadly, as if watching yourself, like you said, right? I mean, you sometimes do need to watch yourself to see if you are steering in the right direction or not. So many things to talk about, but maybe I'm going to hand over to Jillian to see what she thinks.
Yeah, it was really when I was listening and being part of the summit and observing as Francis was putting it together, you can feel the enthusiasm. Like it really feels like you're stepping into your authentic exploration.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I think when we think of a concept, like we think it's going to resonate with us really well. And then maybe the way, even medicine, how it's evolving, it's like in our mind, maybe the way it was done and the way that we have found it at the time that we were seeking it wasn't exactly what we were thinking it was going to be. It might be like the right idea, like it brings you a step closer to understanding what you're truly seeking. So as you integrate and as we met the people, and of course we'll put information on the summit and how people can gain access to the recordings below, because I find that when we were there, it was like these like-minded people that are bringing, I always think we need to bring the healing back into the system. We need to bring the human back into the system. Prevention is so key. And to have a group of very like-minded people that have said, medicine has turned more into something that is the disease model, right? It's not the preventative model as much as it could be. And especially with reimbursement, when I started dentistry, I was very much into prevention. That's not where you make money, and it's very not sustainable in terms of revenue building. Like I can't prevent all the decay in the world and be sustainable as a dentist right now. But interestingly enough, there's a paradigm where there's a shift going on where there may or may not be reimbursements that are really designed to help cater more towards that preventative model. Because one, just like it's so much of what we think about with chronic disease, it's like once it gets to a point, it's really hard to manage and treat. And then you're just kind of helping that person stabilize, versus if we could do the holistic healing where it's preventative, but and it's also holistic, where it's mind, body, soul. There's in the shamanic healing and even with mental health, we're talking about like a lot of how disease shows up as being kind of out of alignment with your spirit and like everything. To me, when I think about when I developed severe depression or the manifestation of my eating disorder, it was like that to me. When we talk about authenticity and how do you know you're in it or you're not, I'm like, that to me was my sign. Like when I was having a mental health crisis, it was like the hardcore existential crisis.
Mhm.
And when I wasn't eating, it was like, because I was so stressed out, and like just that whole human side of myself was like rejecting the forced sleeplessness, was rejecting the culture that had been created in training. So I think sometimes it's easier, kind of like boundaries. It's easier to know when your boundaries have been crossed than to
Mhm.
proactively create them, right? Like
Mhm.
that person crossed my boundaries. Oh, there's my boundary. And then it's kind of like, for authenticity, for me, it was like, this doesn't feel right. Oh, because authentically, this is how I am. Or if we go back to Martha Beck's The Way of Integrity, it's like, oh, because these are my values. This is my true self. This is how I want to present. What are your thoughts on that?
What are my thoughts on that? I would say if you're truly authentic, in a way, you don't even need to worry about if you're being authentic or not.
Mhm.
I could argue people who are very delusional, meaning they feel they're being authentic and they have no reason to doubt their authenticity. And then there are other people who, and maybe what we're doing right now could be, is just struggling with are we being authentic or not, which is part of kind of the journey. But I would say people who are truly authentic don't worry about other people thinking whether they're authentic or not. They don't worry about their being authentic or not. I think that's what's, and whatever that looks like, it's different. So basically, again, three types of people: those who are questioning their authenticity, and those who are claiming authenticity. I would also fall into this group. It's like, oh, I'm authentic. Hey, I'm more authentic than you are. Hey, my authenticity leveled up. Well, if that's a concern, then that may be that you're so concerned about your authenticity, you have to pretend that you're more authentic. And then there's people who are feel authentic, but they don't look authentic from others. And then finally, there's, I think, what we're ironically not aiming for, but something that's not desirable, something that's would be awesome, is to be authentic, resonate with ourselves, and other people see that, oh, they're resonating with themselves. And whenever you're with someone authentic, you also just resonate because they just are resonating. I think that's how I would respond to that.
Yeah, I think you nicely put that. I mean, we know those people, right? All of us know that they're everywhere if you really seek them. They're radiating the inner joy, they're feeling the peace. When they enter the room, they're not necessarily having to compare with each person. Okay, I'm better than this, I'm less better than this, and I'm this and that, and everything else. And they are presenting as they are, and they're doing uh, different things and contribute in different ways and trying to learn. And like the very fruitful trees are humble and easygoing. They come out as very approachable, kind human beings, right? I mean, we know those qualities, and we can, they're very palpable, like you said, I think earlier, that those qualities, those thoughts, those facial expressions, those belief systems, their manners are very, very palpable. So I think it matters less at what stage you are. I think it really does matter that, whether or not you are embarked the journey, I think. And that's, again, going back to the structure of the book. I think that's why we put it there, that, I think the key, as we thought, would be that the more people that embark the journey, the better, because, you got to start aligning somewhere to
Mm.
be aligned at some point in time. And that's an endless process, right? I mean, it's not something that is with a defined endpoint.
and and then of course understanding like how we can evaluate our own internal thoughts and belief based off of how we're interpreting other people's actions. I find that to be very telling.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to give a contrasting example. Like, all of us would have encountered difficult people, toxic leadership, it's all over the place, I mean, very challenging people. But if you just try to change the perspective and look at it with a compassionate lens, often those people are projecting their insecurities and, their
Yeah.
experience and their deficiencies and, their challenging pasts. And, and that just sort of helps us soften the conflict and look at it with a bit more of a positive lens, that, why is that person behaving? Oh no, you gotta be sitting here till 6:30. Okay, why is that person sitting that?
Yeah.
What's making them insecure? What's making them believe and feel like that? So
Yeah.
again, I think it goes back to the need of recognizing and being sort of authentic with ourselves first, and then with others. It's like the smokers say that, they never smell anything, but the other person can quickly tell from a million miles that, you can
Yeah.
recognize a smoker.
So your thought, like last year, I studied a lot about narcissism because I was in a situation. I was like, what the heck is going on? So when I was trying to understand why a person develops narcissistic traits, and like I could justify that it's often a sign of insecurity, and like that, like I was justifying it, and like, well, then do you stay? And then I was gaslighting myself because I was like coaching myself to stay. And then I'm like, what role do I have? Especially in coaching, it's always like, what role do you have?
Yeah.
In this situation, I realized a lot of unresolved conflict was setting me up to position myself in a role and working in that dynamic until you resolve that inner whatever it is that feels comfortable. And like if you grew up with people that also had those traits, like how that impacts you and what does that say about you? And as we're trying to understand our authentic self, I do think it's complicated, right? Especially as we were talking earlier, it's some things that, if we go back to say, well, as a child, it's like, what did you enjoy? And that kind of points to your authenticity. However, if you were in a circumstance where you were in survival mode, that might be harder to decipher what your true authentic self.
Yeah.
If you're in a traumatic childhood experience. And obviously I'm not a mental health person that deals with trauma, but I'm just thinking that might even matters.
Yeah, I like to add, so I'm playing this video game series. There's this sorting school, where once they master it, they get this title, the Divine Blade or whatever it is. And then they're characterized as being able to see the true nature of things. Meaning just be able to see the flow, being able to intervene appropriately, non-efforting effort, because of the very Taoist idea. And the reason I'm bringing this up is if we can, which may require work and training, well, probably does, can we see our own true nature and others' true nature and true nature of things, which in that very word is nature. And for me, one thing I'm learning is being authentic means connecting with our own human nature, which I think also has this divine nature to it, but it's still nature. So authenticity to me is this: what is this true nature and me as a natural person, and how did I become a artifact or artificial, not unnatural being? And that's the inauthentic, I would say, being unnatural and disconnected from nature, but also our own nature. And authenticity is being in one's nature. My I've been, I forget who told me this. I don't know if it was a mentor or a friend, or if in medicine, when you need to go pee, you should probably go pee. If you need to go eat, you're hungry, you should go eat. Except we learn to not follow that nature. Oh, I have to define my nature of the need for, I don't know, sexuality, eating, elimination, or sleep, whatever, right? Why we go against the nature of sleeping, which I'm sure a lot of us know what that is. So, what does it mean to be authentic? I think it's this being in our true nature, and what that is. I think is part of that journey and the legendary quest.
I often wonder, it's hard to know, is it society at large, is it our culture at large, or is it medicine that deprives people of their humanness? Because I get a little bit of a headache when I think about what would I do if, like, and this is my own limiting beliefs, right? Like what can I create? What job can I create where I don't feel guilty for exercising, for going pee, for eating, for sleeping? like when I think about our culture at large, it seems like overwork has been so ingrained into what's normal. And I don't know if that's just such a profound limiting belief in what I, am around so much, or if there are actually careers that really value the human.
Yeah, but I think it's all across, right? I mean, we present some evidence in our book that, the overwork or perceived overwork anyways, all professions, right? Like when I talk to lawyers, accountants, musicians, artists, whoever, I think the whole culture is all prevalent, I mean, yeah, I mean, there's so much to talk about the whole authenticity idea. And, I just wanted to highlight that, that proportion of authenticity is going to be so different for each of us, right? I mean, it's going to be your own N of one model. I mean, it may or may not be similar to somebody else, but I mean, we can't just say that, because X person needs 7.5 hours of sleep, Y person needs the same, or, we know there's so much variation, and, it's for one person to embark the legendary quest to figure that all out for themselves. And it's like, when you enter the Zen space, you're there. It's somewhat like that.
Yeah, and as we close up for today's discussion, what are some last remarks that you would leave with the audience today that maybe can help them in their own journey towards diving into their own authenticity? Or what lasting thoughts do you have?
Yeah, I think my lasting thought is the first thought there is just go for it. I mean, we get one chance to live, and I think you got to go for recognizing, identifying, knowing your best self, vision, and version. And, there's awesome tools, and we hope that our book is one of those tools, or will become one of those tools to be the catalyst for change and, really catapult people in that journey, and that's sort of what inspired us to sort of embark the idea, the philosophy, the work, the synthesis, the experiment, to start the work.
Maybe an exercise or something to check into is how often or overarching am I over exaggerating my sense of self, as in overinflated,
Mhm.
and how often am I under exaggerated or deflated or undercutting myself? Because in the middle, I guess, will be the true nature, right? Where we're flow and flow with ourselves and not
Mhm.
deflated or inflated. And what that is, it's we don't know, but
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, and I would say too, it's like what we talked about is sometimes it's easier to know what's against our authentic self and lean into that. As we know, I did Martha Beck's The Wayfinder Life Coach training, which I'll finish. My dog will bark. He's being authentic to his true dog
yeah,
nature.
yeah.
But also like that body compass of feeling out of alignment and how we can take a step back and to just do those kind of turtle step it. Like this feels more true to self, this doesn't, and that have that fluid acceptance of what
Yeah.
we appreciate about ourselves and what things we might keep and what things we might let go. And I certainly want to foreshadow into our next discussion with chapter 2 is called Too Entitled for Your Title. And I like the foreshadowing that we had during our discussion today was really identifying like who are we without all the labels, and what has the labels meant for us in terms of how has it helped us navigate whether we wanted to get towards a label in particular or what we made them mean.
Yeah.
So I certainly invite everyone to please leave your comments, questions below. Make sure to check out the book and the summit, the Holistic Physician Healers. Is that what it was called?
Yeah.
Yay, yes, it was so fantastic. And it brought in so many elements of medicine that I feel like a lot of us are craving. So please check it out. And until next time, thank you both for being here. And thanks everyone for watching.
Thank you.